Okay, great. We're gonna just head out and just begin our event today. Before we start, I would love to say a quick land acknowledgement. York University recognizes that many Indigenous nations have longstanding relationships with uh, longstanding relationships with territories upon which York University campuses are located that precedes the establishment of York University. York University acknowledges its presence on traditional territory and many indigenous nations. The area known as Takarondo has been caretaken by the Anishinaabeg Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederation, and the Huron-Wendat. It is now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. We acknowledge the current treaty holds and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Convent, an agreement to peaceable share and care of the Great Lakes region. Thank you. I also just want to say thank you again for everybody that made the time for today to join our event, and I also want to thank the people that shared our event on social media. I also want to thank the SUSA team, the Undergraduate Sociology Student Association, for helping me plan this event. So thank you, everybody, Sarah and Cameron, who are here with us today. And I would like to introduce myself. My name is Tawanga Musuku. I'm a third-year sociology student. I'm the director of the event, as well as the vice president of SUSA. I would now like to hand it off to our alumni. We can start with Keisha, then Tara, and then Sarmini, and go in that order.
Okay, thank you, Tawanga. Welcome, everybody. I'm really happy to be here. I was really excited to get the invitation to come out and speak to sociology students. Sociology, obviously, is near and dear to my heart. The time that I spent at York when I was doing my undergrad are really some key moments of my life and really transformative in terms of where I am now. So I'm happy to be able to be here to talk about those experiences and learn, from the students that are currently studying. So I guess you wanted me to talk a little bit about what I do, and is that, yeah, okay, all right. So I do a few things actually, but one of them, I am actually the manager for the One Vision, One Voice program, and that is at the Ontario Association of Children's Aid Societies. So One Vision, One Voice, also known as OVOV, is a program led by the Black community and funded by the Ministry of Community, Children and Social Services. And the focus is on a multi-sector approach to placing attention to how multiple systems, particularly education, policing, and healthcare interact to create and maintain racial disproportionalities and disparities in child welfare for Black Canadians. So that's one of the things I do. In addition to that, I am an organizational transformation consultant. So in that role, I actually work with organizations across different sectors. So I work in education, I've worked in healthcare, I've worked within municipalities to kind of talk about how anti-Black racism impacts the work world. And not just anti-Black racism, like we'll get into how oppression operates across systems and sectors, and how it leads to poor outcomes, right? Okay, no problem. I will slow down. I think am I the only one talking really fast? So everybody knows I do speak very quickly. So I appreciate Nancy in telling me to slow down, and Sean, please forgive me. Are we good to go? All right, excellent. Okay, so I do organizational transformation consultant with a focus on equity and inclusion. You're welcome, Nancy. In addition to that, I'm also the creative director for the Rhythm Fitness Wellness Center, which is located in Ajax. And that is where, I look at it as the meeting place of social justice, Black joy, empowerment, and healing. So it's a space where, we come to learn about ourselves in terms of Black identities and cultures and the Black diaspora. So those are the things that I mainly focus my time doing. I'm actually here at the studio right now, and you might hear music. I sent Tawanga a message to say, if the music gets too loud and disrupting, just please let me know, but it is a Saturday afternoon, so I figure that should be all right, right? A little bit of music in the background? All right, cool. So yeah, that's essentially me, what I do right now, and I'm really happy to be here, as I said earlier. So I guess I can pass it off to the next alumni to talk about who they are. So, or do I send it back to you, Tawanga?
No, Tara's up next. Go ahead, Tara.
All right.
Hey everyone, my name is Tara Jones, and like Keisha said, you know, it's a great time to be here and speaking with all the sociology students at York. I myself obviously have been an alumni at York, and I was actually alumni of SUSA, so I'm really happy to have gotten this invitation for an organization that actually changed my life through York. So I was at York up until I think from 2013 to 2018 studying sociology, as well as spending 4 of those years on SUSA itself. So I have a really great appreciation for everything that the SUSA students do in terms of, you know, enhancing that experience for our sociology undergrads. So right now, I actually, as Keisha said, I do a few things as well. But my main job at the end of the day, I work for DoorDash. If you're not familiar with DoorDash, it's a food delivery platform or tech platform that uses to deliver services to their customers. And right now I actually moved from a project management role to a trust and safety role. So trust and safety kind of operates on the legal side of things. So I work on community response. So any critical issues that do come through, my team is working on that. So we do deal with a lot of heavy things on a daily basis. But you know, being a sociology grad and just using everything I've learned has helped me deal with that and help me kind of assist others deal with that as well. And aside from that, with DoorDash, myself and other colleagues from other organizations I've worked with actually started a for-profit organization called Emerging Youth Consultancy. So we work with a lot of organizations to help enhance and build retention within the workplace for youth. So my focus is a lot of time it is youth and youth of color. And with that, those colleagues came from another organization I worked with called MLSE Launchpad. So I'm not sure if any folks are familiar with MLSE or Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. Launchpad space where it is a sports facility for youth. And we use sport for development to kind of enhance their experience because there are a lot of folks in like at-risk communities. So we kind of operate out of like the Dundas Jarvis area, that a lot of times on the Shooter Street area where we do see a lot of youth who do need more assistance than others. But that space is a wonderful space. And I did just finish my term as a board of director for Youth Seat. So that was really exciting for me to get that opportunity. I spent 2 years on there, being able to kind of provide my perspective, youth perspective, essentially, on what youth need in the space on a daily basis. So with that, working in that space brought me to Emerging Youth Consultancy, which I am actually the director of culture and experience. So using my my sociological imagination to kind of finding key ways to ensure that we can build retention within the workspace, because we know a lot of folks right now, a lot of youth, especially throughout the pandemic, were struggling to find work and just getting themselves back into the groove because a lot of school went online, all that stuff. So yeah, that's just a little bit about me and what I like to do and what I do on a daily basis. And I think I'm going to pass it off to Sarmini.
Oh, was someone else supposed to go?
It was me.
Oh, that was you. Okay. Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarmini. Also, thank you so much for having me here today. And I'm looking forward to learning from all the other speakers and also from all of you when you ask questions or when we have discussions. So looking forward to it. So I am also a SUSA alumni. And once I graduated from sociology, I did do some work at the Catholic Children's Aid Society, and then applied for the Master of Social Work, also at York University. So currently I am a registered social worker. However, at the moment I'm working as a youth worker in the settlement sector. So I primarily do program facilitation and support services for youth who are immigrants, refugees, international students, and a lot of the work that I do is planning programs, different activities, engagement opportunities for youth, getting them involved in the community, addressing some of the challenges related to the immigration experience, challenges that refugees face as families, and where youth get caught up in those experiences and how those challenges can be unique in terms of their adjustment in school, society, and all of these things. So a lot of the work that I do sometimes seems like I'm just having fun with the youth, but I think that's part of the work is offering those spaces for youth to really have that sense of joy and a safe space to play in a sense and really get to meet other people and socialize, because a lot of immigrant refugee youth or even youth from different communities sometimes don't feel that sense of belonging, especially if there's language barriers and all of that stuff. So Previously, before I came into youth work, I was working in psychotherapy. So I was providing psychotherapy for clients who've been involved in motor vehicle accidents. So that was more of a one-to-one clinical work. But however, now it's more community-based, and I really enjoy that environment of really, applying some of those clinical knowledge into community settings, and how that therapeutic focus can be applied into communities, and how it can be made more accessible at the moment. So some of the work that I do is also amplifying youth voices, and really, giving them those opportunities to take those leadership roles, and become advocates themselves, and become agents of social change as well. So that's my focus at the moment.
Thank you, everybody, for sharing your career stories. But it's nice to see that even though sociology works a lot with theory and understanding cultures and the world that we live in, it's something that can also be applied. It's just not something you read in a book and then that's it. You go out in the world, and like Sarmini said, we are agents of social change. So that's very nice to hear. Before we get into our structured Q&A, I forgot to ask our icebreaker question, but you guys did an amazing job. But if you could give a piece of advice to the undergraduate version of yourself, what would it be? We'll start off with Keisha again.
Thanks. I really like that question, because I've often thought back, because I graduated from York with my undergrad degree in sociology in 2005. So it was a minute ago, actually. And I remember during that time, I was really young, and I was really eager to just get into the work world, right? Like I just wanted to work. I was just like, okay, I've got to finish this degree so I can work and get a job and earn some money. At the time, my daughter was very young, and it's interesting because she's now taking sociology at York. And I don't know if you saw me talking, but she's right here. So she's also taking part in the session today, but in person with me right beside me, which is phenomenal. But she was about 5 months when I actually started attending school at York, and I was really excited to be finished so that I could, start working and provide and have a life for her, like myself and my husband. That's what we had wanted. And I really wish that if I could go back, that I would just say, it's okay to just slow down and not rush and be so eager to get to the work world. Although you might not have all the finances that you would want to have and to be able to do the things that you would want through working. But if you really are, interested in pursuing education, whether it's through a graduate degree or PhD, I would say to continue doing that, because I was so passionate about what I was learning, right? I think when Sarmini, or was it Tara, talks about being agents of social change, I was very much believing in that, right? And obtaining as much knowledge as I could about how to really apply it in my day-to-day life, right? And that's the one thing I would say, just, to just take my time, and I would have continued. Years later, I ended up pursuing my graduate degree at York. I did my master's of public policy administration and law through the MPAL program, still focused on social justice. So I still was able to accomplish that. But I would have, if I could go back, I would just say, yeah, continue, because I was enjoying it and I was loving it. And that's it. I would think just focus on continuing to learn and to grow. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Keisha. Tara, what would you tell the undergraduate version of yourself?
I have two things I would tell, because I've gone through this experience, and I know some folks probably have gone through this experience also being a more recent graduate. The times have changed, the world has changed, and it's the pressure is on. So one thing I always say is don't feel pressured to do something that you don't want to do. So if you feel like you want to take an extra year, that's perfectly fine. If you feel like you want to switch your degree, that's perfectly fine. Even though I always put sociology at the forefront. But if you feel like you're feeling pressures, some people have familiar pressures, societal pressures to pursue something. I know it's also great, she's go pursue that extra degree if you really want to. And if you don't want to, that's perfectly fine. There's no need to kind of pressure yourself in that way. I learned the hard way, where I kind of spent 5 years because I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And it was hard because the familiar pressures is okay, you have to do this. You got to graduate, get a master's, get a PhD. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. So it's really important to also think about yourself, because at the end of the day, you are the one obtaining that degree. You're the one having that experience. Even though some people's parents may have paid for the university, at the end of the day, you worked hard to get that degree regardless. So I also want to mention that. The second thing I want to say is, always get involved. The one thing that really helped me throughout university was actually getting involved with SUSA itself. And with SUSA, I was able to kind of branch out and work alongside YFS and other organizations at York. So it's definitely important to kind of dip your toes in. When I was in first year, I was nervous as heck. I was so nervous. And I joined the mentorship program in SUSA. And that's from the mentorship program is where I actually became, the next year I became an actual executive on SUSA. And it was really great to kind of have that experience, because without that guidance, she's not here now. She graduated a long time ago, but Susan Refi was my mentor at York. And Deborah was with me every step of the way. But it was a really great opportunity. So even if you're not involved in SUSA, go to the events and attend something. Ask for a volunteer opportunity. There are plenty of opportunities at York, even if it's virtual right now. It'd be really great to kind of get in there, dip your toes in, and just kind of get the experience. And if you're only on there for a year, that's perfectly fine. But I think one thing that helped me in my career was that SUSA experience made an impact, because all the things we got to do, being able to work on adjudication committees, being able to host and organize events, all that kind of stuff, and the opportunities that we get are great. Sarah, I missed Deborah too. Thank you for letting me know.
Oh, actually, I don't know if you remember Heather Garrett, but she saw your name on the list and she was like, "Oh my goodness, I taught Tara."
Yeah,
she misses you too.
I love Heather. I was also on Falling in Love with Research, if that's still existing area.
It still is. Right now, we're doing research on how COVID-19 impacted sociology students. So
I'd expect us to do something related to COVID, because that's that would make sense, the most sense. But super excited that Falling in Love with Research is still there.
So Armini, go ahead. Let us know what you would tell the undergraduate version of yourself.
So I had to think a little bit about this. I would say the most important thing that I would say to myself would be to trust yourself and pay close attention to what ignites your passion and motivates you to wake up in the morning, because I think that really gives you an idea of what it is that keeps you going, that, really is at your core and what's important to you. Because I kind of had to identify this I think into my 1.5 years into my undergrad, because I actually started off in fine arts as a visual arts major. And, I explored it a little bit because I possibly wanted to go into photography or advertising and all these career options that I was exploring. I really wasn't sure what I was going to do with my art. I didn't think that I wanted to just sit in a studio and paint all day. So I was kind of at a crossroads and kind of had to figure out what I wanted to do. And I really thought about it. And I think for me, although I really enjoyed the learning of art and visual arts, for me, in that degree, the social justice part wasn't really there. It was a little bit missing for me, at least when I was doing it anyway, back in 2005. So I think the conversations weren't as prevalent as they are now. So I think that was really missing for me. And I really wanted to also understand my own lived experiences, surviving war and all of these things. And the world didn't really make sense to me. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my art. So I explored my options, and I thought, okay, maybe I'll go into art therapy. But then I didn't want to limit myself into a particular niche with art therapy. So social work was naturally my next option, because it looked like the career opportunities were broader and, it really seemed interesting to me. So, I figured, how would I get there to social work if I wanted to do my master's? So that's how I ended up, doing sociology. So I would say that's kind of what I would tell myself, is to really understand what it is that, gets you going and what you're passionate about. And also ask others for support if you feel like you can't do it alone, right? Because it's okay to ask others for support. And you might have assumptions of particular careers, ideas that may not exactly be current or whatever. So for me, I had to ask a lot of people, especially going into social work, people in the field, to really understand what the field is like. Volunteering was really important for me to get an idea, but also experiences that might be hard to get as a paid experience. So you really have to be willing to put in that time and effort to find out what it is that you're passionate about. So that's what I would say. And make time for yourself to explore, imagine, identify your goals, and kind of enjoy the process.
Thank you everyone for sharing that piece of advice. And I've seen that the constant theme here is mostly with from even before, a lot of deconstructing the world that we live in. And with that comes amazing skills such as critical thinking, as we all know. But I also just want to ask, what are some other skills that are you can harness as a sociology with a sociology degree? Keisha, any points on that?
Sure. I think, when you mentioned the critical thinking, that is important, being able to really look at a situation and be able to kind of like, break it down and deconstruct it, I think is absolutely key. Because even when you do enter into the work world, right, when you do start to, put your degree to use in whatever chosen field or career path that you choose, you still need to have the ability to be able to critically analyze situations, whether it's around the boardroom or with your colleagues, or especially if you're working to address issues of social justice, right? Like you need to be able to understand the reason for why we see what we see in society and know what your role is in deconstructing it, what your role is in amplifying the voices of people whose voices often don't get heard. You take the privileges and all of the experiences that you have, because we have to understand that it's a real privilege to be able to gain and have access to education in this way, right? So you're using it and you're paying it forward. So I think, having the sense of gratitude, I consider that's a skill. Being humble is a skill as well, and going and working within communities to amplify voices of people, again, who maybe might not have their voices heard in many spaces. And of course, being able to, be an advocate, right? And as well, be able to be comfortable to disrupt, right? Because often we'll go through and things are just like the status quo and they are as they are. And when you're in sociology, you understand why they are the way they are. But the trick is figuring out how to operationalize all this knowledge that you get, all this theory, and to create change in the circumstances of the people that you're choosing to work for, on behalf of, or amongst, or side by side. So as long as you have those types of skills, I think it's beneficial, and you gain all of those things when you're in your courses, right? When you're having those discussions and those debates, and you're back and forth with your classmates, or whether or not you're writing your papers and you really are passionate about what you're writing about, and that it's really connecting. Like it's more of I find the work of sociology, or like the study of sociology, really can connect with a lot of spirit work as well, right? It connects with our hearts and our minds, and we sometimes have visceral responses when we're in our courses because we're so connected to what we're learning about, just based on our own personal experiences. So it's taking those responses, those visceral feelings, and really being able to kind of be laser focused on addressing whatever the needs might be in the communities that you choose to work in. Like for me, I'm looking at things through the lens of social justice. And I think that's the same across the board. When I hear Sarmini talk and Tara talk, like we're all in that same, frame of lens in terms of what we're doing in our work world. So yeah, I think those are some of the key skills that are important.
That was amazing, Keisha. Thank you so much for that.
No problem.
Tara, any skills that you think we should have as sociology majors?
I think that Keisha listed all the skills off already.
I'm really sorry, Tara. I'm sorry.
No, I think that's great. I was like mesmerized by what you were saying. It's really great the way you kind of framed everything there. And I was going to go outside the scope of like our critical like sociology skills kind of thing, like more like instead of our soft skills, like the really hard skills. Because when I finished York, I actually got into the tech world. And that was a surprise to me because I didn't expect to go into tech. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go into like, DEI work and all that stuff. And like, you never know what surprises you, because now in my job specifically, I'm able to kind of do that DEI work with employee resource groups. But one thing I wanted to mention is that I know a lot of things now, they're changing a lot of curriculum in schools where it's like, okay, younger folks are learning how to code at a younger age, learning all these different things that would bring them into STEM. Aside from a lot of like the critical work in sociology, I think we also have to understand like I don't know if everyone has done their statistics courses yet, their stats, which, it's a great course. And I think that's going to come in handy for a lot of folks, because a lot of jobs now require you to have that SQL experience. Or to have some sort of Excel experience, or understanding how formulas and data works. And unfortunately, like now the world is data driven. But yeah, so aside from like the sociology aspect of things, the technical side of things is where I I kind of feel where I've had to gain that experience. And I definitely think it's certainly important, because now we look at the sociology side of things and we look at like, okay, data, the facts, and sociology is obviously a science, right? So those do go hand in hand, but it's also definitely important to kind of make sure you hone in on those technical skills as you navigate through. I'm not saying you have to take courses right now at York in those for that, but there are free resources out there that you could utilize to kind of get the skills that you acquire. But I definitely think if anyone ever wants to go into tech, especially if it's like my organization works emerging youth consultancy, we're working with youth on a daily basis, but it still has a tech aspect to it. You're going to want to have a balance of those skills overall. So yeah.
Thank you, Tara. I just wrote down here in my notes, working with tech using the sociological perspective, which is a nice way to look at it, because even now when we look at, when we talk about anti-racist policies and how over-policing in Black neighborhoods is happening, we have these statistics that show it, you know? So using those statistics once again to bring understanding to the world that we live in is a skill to harness. And
yeah, and I was going to add to that, because in my job we have like our diversity, equity, and inclusion reports. So all of the reports that we show publicly, there's a skill set there that you need to kind of understand that, like from the sociological perspective, having that critical thinking aspect, and just being able to kind of dissect the data, but also making sure like the data adds up to what, like, you know, what are we looking at right now in this world. So that's definitely, I like how it definitely intersects and goes hand in hand together.
Thank you so much.
I'm sorry, I'm so sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to add something as Tara was saying, because, you know, I figure this is an opportunity, you know, you're talking to the future and so forth. When you talk about data and the importance of data, like the data is what informs the policies, right? And then that's how you're able to really target in where the changes need to happen. So it's so important. So having people that are able to do research and data analysis and all of those things are critical. So thank you very much, Tara. I didn't catch everything. That's huge. That's a huge point. So I just wanted to say that. I just wanted to jump on that as well. Sorry.
No worries. That was no problem at all. Sarvini, what do you have to say?
Thank you, Keisha and Tara. I think you touched on a lot of important points. Some of those skills I had noted down as well, so thank you for covering them. You said it so well. I did want to just add a few more that I thought of. So in addition to the critical thinking skills, I think for me, sociology really gave me that understanding of like the macro and micro, and like more so on a theoretical, structural perspective. But I think for me, it was once I got into kind of like the hands-on community work, you know, at Children's Aid, and then doing therapy and getting into social work, where we started having more conversations about, you know, being self-reflexive and really understanding your own social location, and really bringing it back to not just like the systems out there, but really understanding your own self and how that, you know, connects with larger systems, you know, ideas that we've internalized, whether it's racism, you know, discrimination, homophobia, all of these things, and, you know, how sometimes we end up contributing to those systems, and how we can really, that unlearning piece was something that we, you know, talked a lot about in social work. And I think that was really important for me to understand, you know, throughout various practice scenarios and situations, and it doesn't happen overnight, right? So I think this is where I think the soft skills really come into play, really, you know, your own awareness of like your body, like Keisha mentioned, like those visceral experiences that you have, and, you know, where am I getting triggered, and all of these things, and how do I manage my own reactions, and, you know, that sense of presence that you're able to hold in a space when you're working with different communities, because it's so important, right? Whether it's like in a mentorship role, or whether you're there as a therapist or whatever, like your own presence and how you understand yourself really, I think people feel that. So I think that takes a lot of inner work, which is really difficult, right? Even when we talk about racism and really unpacking all of these really difficult emotions and past histories and all of these things. So I think that is important, where you can bring that as well into like the sociological conversation. You know, you're being observant of your environment, but also being observant of yourself, and thinking critically about that, and being willing to being open to learning and unlearning, and just having those people skills, right? Just being open to connecting with people, understanding different points of views, and just how do you say it? Just being aware of what's happening and how you and your unique like social location or your unique perspective can make a difference in that environment. So that was kind of a big learning curve for me. And I would say I'm still, it never ends. It's something that you do daily. And it's just something that you need to be committed to on a daily basis. And it's kind of a lifelong journey. So I think really making time for that, right, is important, I think. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sarah Mini. Actually, before I joined SUSA, I was connecting with the chair of the department, Mark Thomas, and we talked about how for a lot of sociology students, when you first get here, you're kind of hit with all of these, almost as if your reality is falling apart because you realize that everything is a social construct. And a lot of the things you believe in aren't per se real, but more of so many people have told you this is the truth, but then you realize it's not true. Oh, the point of views you have could be almost racist or homophobic, and it's scary and it's really daunting, but it's very, like, you do gain a sense of self-awareness within yourself, and that helps a lot with the degree. I agree. But Saramini, you're talking about how with connecting with people, you're able to, by connecting with communities and individuals, you're able to start these projects that now are there to fix inequality and justice. And just hearing everybody talk, I feel like that's what I'm taking away from this. That I'm going to use that skill and start projects to help fix the inequality and injustices in our world. So thank you so much, everybody, for sharing on that question. And the next one, just to follow up with the skills, how is the current job market looking like for sociology students with your own experiences? If you've switched any jobs recently, how is that? Ooh, Keisha, you can go ahead and start.
Sure, no problem. So in my current role as manager for the One Vision, One Voice program, I often get the opportunity to sit in on interviews and for different positions, right? So positions on my team, the team that I work on, the team that I support, as well as other ways. Like there's the learning department through the Ontario Association of Children's Aid Society, and they provide all of the different learning for the sector around equity and inclusion. And I think, Sarmini, you would be very familiar with some of those things, having worked at CAS. But one thing I've noticed is when interviewing people who have a degree in sociology, they really get it, I find, right? Like when you ask these questions around social justice, like you talk about deconstructing, like they have this nuanced skill and ability that they've gained over the course of the years in study to be able to speak really well into situations of injustice, right? Because when you're looking for people with those skills, you want them to go beyond the theory and be able to identify it both on the micro and the macro level, as well as within themselves, like situating themselves in all of this, in everything, right? To be able to say, this is how I see myself, whether or not being complicit or historically, like the community that I'm a part of, or whatever social location identities I hold. So the current job market, I would say, in terms of where I'm seeing from my vantage point, is looking good for people who have sociology degrees, people who've studied the social sciences, people who have their master's in social work, like Sarmini is mentioning. Like my master's is in policy, but it's all very much connected, right? Like it's all around, working within the community and trying to solve the issues that we see with community, right? Engaging with community and so forth. So I would say the job market is great. Like I know you see a lot of the diversity, equity, inclusion job postings. You must see them. I see them. They come up on my thing all the time. So there's a lot. The problem is having people who are working in those roles without a real, true, genuine understanding of how important it is to understand, as Sarmini mentioned, their own social location, right? To understand how deeply entrenched and embedded all of these ideas and oppression is in our institutions, right? And that we have to, the institution's made up of people, and that we all play a part, right? So what I'm finding is that yes, there are a lot of, especially after 2020, there are a lot of people who are entering into the workforce to do equity and inclusion and diversity without truly having an understanding. They're causing harm, right? And so the job market is primed and ready for people who have a genuine understanding of equity inclusion and that sociological perspective, right? So I would say things are looking good job market wise. I'm excited whenever I see people who have degrees in sociology and social work or whatever, like apply for positions in the work that I'm doing. So yeah, there's definitely a need. So I think things are looking good. You know, maybe my other panelists might have a different viewpoint, but I think now is the right time. And especially, as Tara is saying, especially after 2020, you know, we have this racial awakening, this awareness, supposedly, a little bit, somewhat, in terms of how people are viewing the world and understanding how oppression operates. So now is a time to, you know, have people who are well-educated and understanding and lived experience to be able to get into those roles to create the change that we know is so desperately needed.
Thank you so much, Keisha, for that. Tara, how are you feeling about the job market for students with a sociology degree?
I think right now, I think it's looking pretty decent. It's looking well. Just from my perspective, when I interview folks at my job, because we have a very sensitive role where we are dealing with a lot of, you know, sometimes we have things you see on the news. We deal with law enforcement on a daily basis, all that stuff. And the folks who do have those sociology degrees or those social science degrees, it does matter because it shows that, you know, you have a better understanding in a way, and you can be a little more compassionate to those situations. And alongside, I guess, because I was in project management before I moved to this role, there was still, I think, still ample amount of opportunity for folks to kind of get to find jobs on the market, especially like after 2020. But also when it comes to folks, I know some jobs out there will say like, yeah, you need like 10 years experience and like all that stuff. I'm not going to say anyone needs 10 years experience, but when I mentioned like getting involved in school makes a difference. It makes a difference because, like I said, when I started at DoorDash, like the work I did with SUSA and YFS is actually what really brought me over the edge because I had experience in retail and that was it. So being able to kind of hone in on those skills that and being involved in my education and things like that really did make a difference. But also just being able to take your degree and use it in a way that benefits, I don't want to say benefits you, but everyone else. And being able to kind of, I guess, use it accordingly. So like use your degree the right way in a sense. So like when I get people who apply to jobs, sometimes I'll see like business degrees or economics degrees. That's great. That's awesome. But I also look when I see a sociology degree, I'm like, okay, I can connect with this person on a different level. We might understand each other a little bit more. So I think you guys have a really good opportunity to use your degree to the best of its ability because sociology is one of the most diverse degrees. And you can literally work in any field. So if you don't want to work in DEI, that's perfectly fine. But I'll tell you right now, like you're going to have a lot of experience. You can gain a lot of experience from working in different fields and still using your degree to kind of bring that sociological perspective with that you earned with your degree into any role that you work in. So folks working like government. I know Laura's not here right now, but she went to law school. She's a lawyer now. Because I think we were on SUSA together. we were in the same at York around the same time. I have some other friends who went to SUSA who also work for the government. They work for Ontario government. They work for federal government. And I have some friends who also work for like tech startups, like I do. So it's really great to kind of not feel like you're confined to one specific thing with your sociology degree, but the fact that we have so many options and there's a lot of variety that comes with this degree in general, that you can literally do anything and still kind of apply what you've learned and you've taken from that education and put it into the work that you're doing. But I do see a lot of jobs on the market right now, and it's like there's a lot there. And, you know, even if you don't feel like you have the experience, still apply. I would say don't feel like if you feel underqualified, you're probably not underqualified. I'll just say that. A lot of times we see folks, so like I said, like it says 5 or 10 years degrees of experience. Okay, great. But like also who has the 10 years of experience that they're looking for? And if they want someone who's a millennial who understands what the world is like right now, the 10 years or 20 years of experience may not even matter. So it's definitely, it's how you kind of finesse the interview, I guess, in a way, or finesse yourself in the interview to kind of emphasize on the fact, like, you know, the work that you've done or like the degree that you have does make a difference and it does make an impact into the work that you do want to do going forward.
Thank you so much, Tara. Finesse the interview. I like that. I'm gonna take that with me. Sarmini, how do you think the job market's looking for sociology majors?
So I'll build a little bit on what Tara had said. I can't speak from a hiring perspective so much, but I can speak to kind of my experience of, you know, looking for work and some of the work that I do with the youth, which I think can be applied, you know, in any situation really. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think like if you look for like a specific position like sociologist, on, like Indeed or whatever, you might get like limited opportunities available there in terms of that specific title. But when I did put that in, a lot of the positions that came up were related to like, teaching or research related positions. So, if you're looking beyond something like that, I think really honing in on what areas that you might be interested in, whether it's like policy work or social justice or, working with families or children or youth, maybe in the legal sector or whatever it may be. So really taking the time to figure out what specific areas in the community that you're actually interested in, and then looking for those positions, and really paying attention to all the transferable skills that you're learning, whether it's in your courses or maybe in your part-time work or volunteer opportunities, like Tara mentioned, like the work that you're doing at school, involved in student associations. I feel like a lot of the jobs are looking to see, how you can leverage your transferable skills, right? Like she said, finesse the interview and know your assets, right? I think it's important to not just look for work, but also have a good understanding of what you're bringing to the work that you're applying to, because you're also an asset to the company that you're applying to. So really having that sense of confidence that you're just not just looking for work, but you're also bringing something valuable to them, and possibly making a difference in the place that you apply to or that you end up getting a job. So and I think the other thing would also just be networking, trying to make as many connections as possible, getting out there in the community and doing hands-on work really gives you an understanding of what the work actually looks like. I think it's very different looking at a job description and actually, being in that environment and doing it, right? So those volunteer opportunities, if you're able to make time for that, even if it's like maybe 1 or 2 hours a week or something at an organization that maybe you're looking to go into that area of work, or you just want to make a difference, it really helps in my personal experience. That's how I got those connections for my, the work that I ended up doing. And I was able to put that on my resume and be like, I don't have necessarily a lot of work experience, but I can leverage my volunteer experience because those are transferable skills. And they know that if you're volunteering and you're not getting paid, but you've been committed to that work, that also says something, right? That you want to make a difference in that area of work. And people will see the work that you do as a volunteer, and they're more likely to recommend you, or you have those references if you need them. You can also check out the Canadian Sociological Association for more information, and also Job Bank Canada as well.
Thank you so much, Sarah Minnie. That was beautifully said. We have a question that was posted in the chat, and I know Sarah Minnie spoke to it a little bit, but I think Chanindi, I'm so sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. I'm so sorry. But I feel like this is a question that I feel like a lot of people don't talk about, especially when it comes to disabilities, and especially, I don't know if this is an invisible disability, such as someone who's deaf. So what would you guys say to that for them in particular, and if jobs are willing to accommodate? Tara, you can go ahead and start with that one, actually.
Yeah, so I think I deal with this on a daily basis with my job, because we have a lot of
let's wait a bit. His interpreter is being frozen.
Oh, are we good? Okay, cool. Sorry. I was gonna say, I think I deal with this on a daily basis because of the work that I do. We have a lot of programs at work where we call them, like, it's a university essentially. So we have like learning programs that take 7 to 8 weeks to graduate from. And a lot of the time I see that we do have interpreters because people are either hard of hearing or they are deaf. And it's kind of, we want to be inclusive of that and make sure that they feel like they're a part of the group instead of being excluded or having a separate segment for them. So right now I am seeing a lot of folks, or a lot of jobs, and a lot of different organizations who are actually being more open, because a lot of times people see it as a stigma where it's like, okay, maybe you're not going to be doing the same job as everyone else, or, you're not going to be able to catch up right away or catch up as quick as everyone else, essentially. But I've noticed that, like, in a lot of the tech world, that they are very, very open and making sure that folks have everything that they need. So like I said, I've had ASL interpreters in many of my meetings at work, or just even being in live events where we have interpreters standing there, and making sure that everyone is being able to hear the same thing, or being able to understand the same thing, I should say. When I started out at DoorDash, I was doing a lot of I was working with a lot of drivers, independent contractors, and a lot of them would come in, and some of them would be deaf or hard of hearing. And with that, we were able to kind of, there's actually, I'm not sure if anyone ever orders DoorDash, and I'm not sure if anyone's ever had a driver who who was hard of hearing or was deaf. It actually notifies you in the app that that person is hard of hearing or deaf. So I'm looking to see, like, we're moving forward to see that a lot of the time, that they are being more inclusive. And as myself and Keisha mentioned, after 2020 especially, like, people are being very, very careful with what they're doing in the workplace, making sure when it comes to DEI stuff, like, making sure that definitions are followed with the correct definition, like words are followed with the correct definition, ensuring they're not being non-inclusive, essentially. So I think that there is an opportunity, as long as it's obviously noted down, making sure that accommodations can be made ahead of time, because if you go to an interview and someone does not know that you're deaf or hard of hearing, it's going to be very difficult for them to kind of accommodate in that way. But it's good to know ahead of time and have that conversation beforehand, as opposed to like right on the same day. But I feel like a lot of folks are very accommodating and very open and inclusive to making sure that people who are deaf or hard of hearing or have other disabilities can actually go ahead and participate and be a part of that group, instead of feeling like they're excluded all the time.
That's honestly, what am I trying to say? I feel like, as I've said before, going on within our current society, we have become more aware on our ableist ways of thinking, and to deny somebody a position or a job just because they're hard of hearing or they live with a disability, there's no reason for their credibility, their work to be judged. But it's sad. It's a sad reality to think that for a long time people would justify not hiring somebody based off of disabilities. Keisha, go ahead, and what would you say to the question that was posed earlier?
I think Tara did a fantastic job speaking into that. You know, although there have been a lot of changes, and we're seeing changes, and you know, some people like the word journey, some people don't like the word journey, but some organizations are still journeying, right? Like they're at the very beginning in terms of trying to address issues of equity and inclusion and understanding what that looks like, right? Understanding, you know, how certain oppressions and barriers have been put in place that stop people from being able to even get access to positions, right? So because of that, you know, we have to be honest and acknowledge that that is very much a fact and a reality. But one thing that I can say, I can share a personal story if you don't mind. It's not quite the same as, you know, what Chandini was mentioning, but just to give an example in terms of like, it's not so much even about getting into those organizations that you think you might want to be in, because say those are the ones that, you know, are the most sexy or the most appealing because you want to be there based on the money or whatever, right? Like I know we talk about working in government and different spaces. And when I first, when I finished my graduate degree, I was eager to switch. So I was doing direct service. I worked for the Canadian Mental Health Association as a case manager, and I was working in the community, and I was ready to kind of move on and really focus on policy and like not be as working directly as much in community, but working for community, right? Based on the things, the knowledge, the things that I had learned in that time. So I was eager to apply for jobs, and I really struggled with getting calls, and a lot of it had to do with my name. So I see a lot of us have names that often get passed over during interviews, during that process, right? And so, you know, I had a mentor, and a mentor had shared with me that if I was really interested in getting the position that I wanted, if I wanted to earn the dollars that I wanted to earn, that I might want to consider whitening my name a little bit, right? To create opportunity for myself. And I struggled with that. But like I mentioned earlier, for me, you know, with a young family, a young mother, I was really eager just to get out there and earn, right? Like after having been without financially for so long, you know, just really wanting to get out there. So, you know, I was faced with this dilemma. Do I change my name, use something that's a little bit more Anglo to get these opportunities, or to go and present myself as Keisha in my most authentic self? So I chose the other option, which was not the right choice. But at the time, it was hard to convince myself otherwise. So I switched my name. I did. I went with my middle name, which is Denise, which is a lot more Anglo. And I did get opportunities. My phone started to ring. I started to get interviews. And I figured once I get into the interviews, I can, wow them with that finessing that Tara talks about or Sarmini talks about, to make it a little bit more, give myself an opportunity. And one position in particular that I took, and I went there, it actually was the worst time of my life, right? Like it was the worst. And I don't know if it was because I went in there not being my fully authentic Keisha self, but rather went in with this whole mask that I had to put on to kind of conform. White supremacy makes it so, right? So it's like, I'm not blaming myself fully. White supremacy makes it so, right? So have to go in and conform. But it was like the worst experience of my life. So to Chandini's question, there will be jobs that maybe you will want to think like, this is where I want to be. And then you see the signs, you see the red flags that this is maybe a place that you don't necessarily want to be at. And then you go through these experiences and then you somehow find yourself in the most ideal situation in terms of where you're working. You're working at a place that, it connects and aligns with who you are authentically, right? And it feels good. The work feels good. You're not questioning, you're not doubting, you're not wondering whether or not you belong and whether or not you're, like those questions kind of leave because you're being appreciated for what you're able to bring and the wonderfulness and the power that you hold. And that's, everybody has to go on their own journey, right? Like I see people connecting with all the theories and all the things of what I'm describing, right? Which is cool because I'm amongst sociologists, right? So we can do those things. But to be honest with you, like you end up going through your own journeys. And I'm saying this because I'm hoping that wherever it is that you land, whatever opportunities that you take and whichever jobs you do choose to go to, that there are places that you find you can be yourself. You can bring your authentic self there, right? So I share that story just to kind of, there was something in your comment that you had said, Chandini, that I really, really resonated with me. And then Tara said as well. And I was thinking that you're the ones with the skills. Employers want you, right? Like you can't go into it thinking that they're doing you a favor. You are doing them the utmost in favor because you're bringing innovation, you're bringing fresh ideas, you're bringing your new perspectives, you're bringing excitement, and you're not like that jaded, kind of way that happens after like years and decades of working. You're not bringing all of that. You're bringing a fresh perspective. So keep that in mind. They're lucky to have you because truly they are lucky to have you. So yeah, that's all I want to say about that.
Beautifully said, Keisha. Thank you so much.
All
So
right.
do you also want to touch in a bit more on Charmindi's question? Chandini.
I think Tara had something that she wanted to share, I think.
Oh, that was for a next question that was posed by Sarah, mostly on payment.
Okay.
Do you have anything to say, or should we move on to the next question?
I can just add a little bit. So I would say, when you're also looking for work, check out the companies like accessibility policies and kind of do some background research on the organization. Of course, a lot of positions will have their little like token blurb there. We're open to diversity, blah, blah, blah. But, when you go into the organization, it's a whole different story. And I think, the interview is a really good opportunity to see whether, they're actually accountable for the things that they're putting on their job posting or on their website, whether it's just like a surface level kind of thing, or whether actually they're committed to, making sure that those policies are put in place and it's making a difference in the workplace. So I would definitely look into that. And also, I think job searching can be challenging because sometimes you're in a tight position financially and you may have to, you feel like your options are sometimes limited, but I think, making an active effort to also ask the employer, like how diverse is your workplace, or, what is your accessibility policy like? Can you give me an example? I have this disability, what can you do to accommodate that? So just being proactive and seeing whether that's the place that you really want to be at and whether they can actually make space for you and, have that environment where you feel safe, right? There's also places that where they do actually have specific employment support for people with disabilities or on a spectrum of abilities. So one of them is abilities to work. You're probably aware of some of these, but I just wanted to mention it. I can put the website in the chat here. You can also, look into March of Dimes Canada. They offer a lot of support employment-wise. They have connections with employers, and they're able to provide employment support services for clients, and also be there to communicate with the different employers as well, and make sure that these accessibility needs are also being met. So those are some options that are out there as well, if you needed specific support employment-wise, and where those organizations have a better understanding of what those needs are and how they can support you.
Thank you so much, Sarmini, for that and giving out the resources. Very appreciated. And for our other alumni, if you guys have any resources you'd like to share with the students, just go ahead and post it on the chat, or you can email me separately and we can come up with a document that I'll be sharing with the students. So they at least know where to go. you never know where to go until you have the information needed. So that's good. Our next question was posed by Sarah. She asks, as being a graduate this year of 2022 summer, how do you find starting up on payroll, and with years of experience, how that pay changes, promotions, increase in pay, etc. Then she also says not only payroll, but also moving up in your position because of your years of experience. Keisha, can you start us off with that one?
Sure. So if I'm understanding, it's really about like when you first start your position in terms of your pay rate that you're receiving. Is that the question, is around like in terms of your
from what I'm saying, I guess starting off, with I guess it also depends on what field you're going into, right? We can ask Sarah for some clarification. Sarah, if
yeah, I can unmute. I guess what I'm trying to say is like, I don't know why it came out as pay, but because I know like after years of experience in a certain organization that you do receive promotions. But then I also started thinking like, sometimes I'd want like a better position, or I want a certain job. It's just that I don't have that experience yet. So it's like, I want to go somewhere. It's just that they require like 5 years experience of teaching, or 5 years of experience of being in places that working with those who are in like precarious situations, or working with traumatized individuals. So having that experience, how would you recommend, I guess, starting off and like going up the scale? I guess I'm trying to word this correctly.
No, I understand. Thank you, Sarah, for clarifying. So I would say, first, when you first start in a position, the one thing that I think is always good is to negotiate your salary, negotiate your rate. We don't do that often enough. In particular, racialized women, racialized people, like there's the negotiating of the salaries is a thing that doesn't always happen enough. It has to happen more. So even though you're just entering into the work, your first position, or whatever, don't be afraid to negotiate, right? Like, what you're going to be bringing, what you're going to be able to offer, and do that dance, right? Employers, by the time you get to that negotiation spot where they're trying to figure out what your salary is going to be or how much they're going to pay you, they want you. They see something in you, they know you have skills that they want to bring to their organization. So don't be afraid to negotiate, number one. Number two, I would, and maybe Tara and Sarmini might be able to speak in this a little bit better, but I would always recommend being willing to kind of move around, right? Like, so if you're in one organization, don't be afraid to move to another. When I worked at the Canadian Mental Health Association, I worked there for 13 years in total. But while I was there, I worked in just about every single department and position. I did mental health and justice, I did case management, I did psychosocial rehabilitation, I did safe beds. I did I really tried to understand as much as I could and gain as many skills as I could within mental health, right? Before I moved on to something else, right? And I amassed tons of skills as I was going. I didn't realize it at the time. I can look back now and say, yeah, my time there, I gained this skill. My time here, my ability to do assessments really skyrocketed because I was doing this, right? Like, so it's always good to just, be brave in that way, to just move around, right? And learn new things. Don't think that it looks bad if you're always moving around too much, because I don't think it does, right? I think people really aren't staying in positions like back in the day, like my parents' day, like people would be in the same job for like 25, 30. My mom was in her role that she was in for about 50 years, right, before she retired. I don't think it's really quite like that anymore in terms of the work world. So just not being afraid, because as you're moving around, you're amassing additional skills, you're also able to now negotiate additional pay for yourself, right? And each time you go, always negotiate your salary. And if you're talking about seniority, which it kind of sounded like you were talking about seniority, then that's something different in terms of like unions and depending on the position that you're in, right? But I think those would be some nuggets. And that's one thing like I really wish that somebody had told me a long time ago in terms of negotiating my salary. I learned that the hard way many times. Just want to pass that on to anybody if you're ever in a position, always negotiate. But yeah, over to you, Tara.
Yeah, when I saw that Sarah posted this, I was like, I have a story for this because working at DoorDash was my first job right out of York, and like York was on strike. So like I was applying for jobs. I'm like, I'm not going back to school. I'm gonna graduate with like handing my essays in like on through Moodle, whatever it may be. So when I first found my job, I was like, this sounds like a job that I would want to do. I was doing orientations, which sounds like, okay, I feel like I'm getting paid to do SUSA work essentially. So it was really fun for me to do this. It was a full-time job and I was finishing up school, and I was still volunteering and doing other things outside of like my day-to-day job and like my education. But with that, like I loved it. And I think a lot of times when you show the passion that you have in the work that you do, I know some organizations are not like this. some are very, unfortunately, there are some toxic organizations out there. But I was really lucky to kind of be a part of an organization that saw the value in the work that I did and like learned from my experiences. So having that sociological perspective as well, actually helped me when it comes to meeting with independent contractors and giving them and just kind of understanding them and hearing their stories and understanding where they came from, because that's all like precarious work, right? A lot of these folks don't even have jobs. Some have been laid off, things like that. And I was able to build a connection with them. And with that, like I felt very confident in the work that I was doing, where I didn't expect any promotion or anything like that. I was like, I'm just doing my job, yada, yada, yada. And I got that opportunity to be asked to move up to a higher position. So moving to a senior role. And then a couple months later, again, I'm moving up again. And that was like one of my stories I tell like new hires when they join my company, where it's like, I got promoted twice within 8 months of being a part of the company. And I moved up from an hourly role to a salary role fairly quickly, but it's because the experience I had working with or being a part of like different organizations outside of work and outside of school, and like using my education to help me kind of understand and gauge exactly how we want to interact with different individuals. Because we have individuals come in and like we do background checks and things like that. And there are some folks, sometimes folks don't have the best history. So a lot of times you're gonna have to change your focus on how you approach somebody depending on like whatever it may be. But I will say that being able to move up in a company, sometimes it's for good, sometimes it's for you, sometimes it's not for you. So for me, this time it was for me. But other opportunities I've had were not for me, where I've declined those, because just because someone offers you something to kind of make more money or like do something that maybe you to make more money or do something out of your realm, you may not always be interested in that. And sometimes it's not always about the money. I know in this society and in this economy in Toronto, it's really expensive to live here. So I definitely understand that. But like Keisha said, when it comes to like working in an organization, being able to switch roles and move roles within that organization is really great. So like I said, I started out with doing orientations. I was an operations manager. Great. No longer that, I went to a project manager role, and now I work on the legal trust and safety side of things, which was great for me, because even within those positions specifically, you were still able to learn other parts of the organization, because you work cross-functionally with a lot of people. I worked with engineering teams, I work with data teams. I have no idea what engineering does, but I've had to work with them in terms of making sure that things were put in place. So when it comes to like that pay and looking up at like reviews and like having your performance reviews and getting that increase in pay, I've gone through a couple annual and mini reviews, and sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not good. Sometimes companies, unfortunately, people have budgets, so it's not always going to be what you expect it's going to be. But you could always move to a lateral position, which is what I've done. So I haven't, like, for the last job I had in DoorDash, it was a lateral move to this position here. And obviously, not just because it's a lateral move doesn't mean you're going to get paid the same. So sometimes another position with an organization that may be similar to what you were doing before may be a different wage of pay. And a lot of people now, a lot of organizations are paying for performance. So how you perform is how they measure your increase at the end of the year, is basically how you perform throughout the year. So it's essentially how you do in school. They're basically grading you based on how the work that you do. And it can be great and it can not be great at the same time, but at the end of the day, like if you know, like if you want to say you're meeting expectations, or like, you know, you're going above and beyond, and like you are being rewarded for that, which I would say that DoorDash is a very wonderful, inclusive, open, and generous company where they are very transparent when it comes to that kind of stuff. But I know some organizations are not as transparent. But what I was going to say essentially is that like a lot of companies now, and especially I'll say this like for tech companies, if you do want to get that upward mobility, and you do want to kind of dip your toes in different areas of different like organizations or different like orgs or different departments, and kind of get a feel for what's out there, I would definitely recommend working in like the tech industry in a sense. I'm not saying you have to be like tech savvy, you can do anything. Because DoorDash, you know, is a delivery platform, but we have like a range of positions that you wouldn't even think about. So with that being said, like they pay for performance, but also now I think I mentioned before, living in Toronto, it's a little different in the economy. A lot of companies are actually paying you based on where you live. I'm not sure if anyone actually knows that right now. So they call it market analysis. So if I have a position here and someone has another position somewhere else that maybe the cost of living might be lower, they kind of do it based on what the market is looking at right now for that job in that area. So that's also something to think about when it comes to moving up a position, but or just like being able to work, getting into the workforce. So I wouldn't put a strain on anything. I'd say dip your toes in, get a feel. Like you don't expect to get like a 100K salary the moment you get your first job out of university. We do have to work our ways up, and kind of understand where we are with ourselves and like where we are in our workplace. And with the experiencing, like I mentioned before, it doesn't matter if you feel unqualified, like just because it says you need 5 years experience, like we've all said before, that volunteer experience makes a difference. It makes a difference, and it has an impact on the work that you do. So if you have this experience on SUSA, for example, you can go into a job and say, when they say 5 years experience or relevant experience, whatever it may be, you can still use that as leverage, because ideally someone could have 5 years experience, but have they utilize that experience well, right? So I think that's something that is important to touch upon.
Thank you so much, Tara. We really appreciate that. Saramini, can you go ahead and let us know your question for Sarah?
Thank you, Keisha and Tara. I learned a lot from what you just shared, because this is kind of like a learning opportunity for me as well, in terms of what Keisha mentioned about negotiation, which, it's also just having that sense of self-worth, right? And knowing that your skills and what you bring to the table also is really important. And, that you're also making a difference in the organization, and you're getting the pay for the work that you're doing, especially if that organization is missing some of those pieces. So I don't have too much to add, because I think Keisha and Tara covered it really well. I just wanted to add one piece in terms of, I think, just recognizing your limits, right? Sometimes, like Tara mentioned, there might be positions that open up that, it looks good, but maybe it may not be the best for your situation. The position might demand a lot, but the pay may not be that much higher for the amount of work that you're doing, which can happen a lot in organization, unfortunately, in not-for-profit organizations that don't have a lot of funding, and the organizations are in a tight position. So a lot of these issues are not uncommon. So it can be really difficult, and of course that's something that we have to use our own discretion based on, maybe our own financial situations or life situations and all of that. But I think just keeping that in mind, right? Knowing your limits about what is okay for you and what is not okay for you, and learning to say no, and being an advocate for yourself when it comes to your salary. And I think sometimes, organizations may have pay freezes, and you really don't see that increase in wages and promotions and all of these things. And I think that's where, you may have to really be okay with letting go of, something that you're familiar with or comfortable with, and willing to take that risk to try something else at a different organization altogether. And, being on the lookout for something that is more suitable to what you're looking for in terms of your pay wage range or something. Based on the experience that you learned. So I think Keisha said it really well, just making the most of the time that you're at an organization, and really, picking up on all the different skills that you can possibly, so that, you can use it to your advantage when you are looking for something else. And sometimes it's just, you just have to say goodbye and go, if the situation calls for. And sometimes it's not even just about the wage, sometimes it's also about your mental health and your well-being and all of these other factors as well that come into play as well. So just keeping that in mind.
Thank you so much, Sarmin. Oh, go ahead, Keisha.
No, Sarmini, thank you so much about the mental health piece. That is so key. Like knowing when to just leave and walk away when it's a toxic work environment that is unhealthy, it is never, ever, ever worth it to stay. Like I also learned that lesson, like in terms of the dollar value that you put on it and thinking that you have to because you're trying to earn and earn and earn, but meanwhile you're dying inside, right? And every day, because it's where you're going on a daily basis. So it's really important for, or mostly every day, it's important for you to be, safe and comfortable in those spaces, I think is really key. I also wanted to say that it's important when you are just starting out to seek out a mentor. Find someone who you're comfortable with, who you can connect with, who might be just a little bit further along in their career. It doesn't have to be a whole bunch of years ahead, but just somebody that can offer you advice, right, as you're going through, and that you can talk to candidly about navigating sometimes the complexities that exist in workplaces. There are politics sometimes that you have to navigate. There are things that you have to, choose which hills you want to die on. Like that's an expression that people say, like you got to choose which battles you really want to fight. It's so that you can like live to fight another day. You need to be able to have that person that you can have those open and, courageous and, trusting conversations. And that has been, I think, very key to like, especially the latter half of my career now. Once I have had other women, in particular Black women, who've navigated the work world, speak to me and affirm my experiences, it has been world changing for me. So just one thing to keep in mind. It's important to have a mentor as you go through. Just wanted to add that.
Go ahead, Keisha. Oh no, Keisha, Tara, my mistake. So sorry.
We had our hands up at the same time. I was going to say, I mentioned employee resource groups earlier, which is something that I'm a part of at my organization. I know a lot of organizations are including that in are part of their work now. So we have like a woman at DoorDash or a Black at DoorDash, and we've very much work out with outside organizations as well with our social impact teams. But it's employee-led for employees by employees, essentially. And if you find an organization that has that, I think that's a great place to start being a part of that, because there are a lot of opportunities and resources that they can offer you as well in terms of like that mentorship component, or just having someone to talk to if you're new in the organization, or just being involved in certain things to kind of help enhance like experience in the workplace, essentially. I know some people just like, they go to work, they come home, they're kind of bored. It happens, I'm not gonna lie. That was me in the beginning when I worked at DoorDash, but then I started to kind of learn more about my organization and found that there were opportunities there. So now I'm happy to say, like, I'm a co-chair for our Women at DoorDash employee resource group, and being able to have that sociological perspective and like coming from that background, it makes a difference. And it's really, I'm really happy to kind of have opportunity to kind of, when women come into the workplace, or women of color come into the workplace, to kind of be that point of reference for them, where it's like, okay, what do we want to talk about? What are the things on top of mind? How can we kind of dissect this? And like, what can we learn from this going forward? And what can we do to kind of break those barriers, essentially? So there are definitely opportunities in some workplaces that do have that. And, like we said, after 2020, things started changing. So a lot of companies are now creating employee resource groups. But the ones that make the most impact, the ones that have the most impact, I should say, or the ones that make a difference, are the ones that actually work with our outside organizations. So we have like our Black at DoorDash group, where we have a donation to Black Lives Matter. Black History Month is a whole other thing where we kind of advertise our Black owned businesses, kind of thing. So just making sure that aside from just showing face, you're actually putting action behind those words that you're saying. So that's also a great opportunity to have as well. And with that, we do have a lot of like decompression sessions. So or just opportunities for people to decompress and like kind of talk things through, like talking about that burnout, the mental health side of things, like somebody mentioned. So I just wanted to add that in there as well.
No, thank you everybody for your points. Actually, I put a note down on look out for a mentor. SUSA actually has a mentorship program for the sociology students. So we have our 3rd and 4th year students mentoring our 1st and 2nd year students. So please, guys, sign up for it. I'll have it on our Instagram. I think a lot of you probably found us on Instagram. We do have a mentorship link that you can sign up for, what year you're in, and we can assign you with a mentor to just help you figure out the next couple of years of undergrad. Anything else on the list that we can get done? We only have about almost 20 minutes left. So if anybody else has any questions they'd like to ask the alumni, I remember there was one posted about interviews and interview anxiety. Does anybody want to talk? Oh, actually, so much has been said already. Oh, thank you, Keisha. I just saw the message now. I'm looking at the chat, so sorry. But Sarmini, do you have anything to say on interview anxiety, actually?
I just wanted to say that I also have interview anxiety. So I can relate. I can totally relate. You're not alone. I just wanted to say that you're not alone. I think it's just, you kind of, just have to breathe and allow yourself to take that risk and, do prepare ahead of time as well. Do some preparation. I think definitely for me, the having some research and support from others who can, that you feel safe practicing some of those questions with, who can help you see what you're good at, right? If you have mentors, like Keisha said, that really kind of have an understanding of the work that you're doing, where you want to go, some of your goals, what your assets are, and they can help you identify those. Because I've had situations where I'm writing resumes and, some of my mentors have been like, no, you've done more than this. You should, be adding this to your resume. And I'm like, oh yeah, like sometimes you forget what you do, like, especially like Keisha said, if you're doing a lot of different things, you sometimes forget and you don't really give credit to yourself for the work that you're doing. So really taking that time to identify all the things that you're good about. I think with interviews, it also takes just a little bit of like inner work to really find that sense of confidence within yourself and trust yourself and go for it. I don't think it will completely take away your anxiety, just to be too realistic about it. Just breathe your way through it. I'm sure you will do well.
I've actually noticed that a lot of anxiety is almost like the fear of the unknown. And if you're able to prep, do your research, know what your assets are, there's nothing to be left unknown. The only thing is whether or not you get the job. And if it's out of your control, ooh, at least you prepped, Like, Tara, your hand's up, go ahead.
I was gonna add, because I'm very open with this. Like, I have anxiety in general, and I definitely understand interview anxiety, and I have anxiety interviewing people. So like it's a full, it's circle, it goes full circle, right? But the one thing I can say as someone who's gone through the interview process and who introduced other folks is, yes, what Sarbini said in terms of being very prepared. And making sure that you ask questions. That's one thing too. Like, always ask questions. Don't ever leave an interview not ask a question. Even if you say, "What is the schedule going to look like?" That's the question to ask. Like, they're gonna write down that you did not ask any questions, and that is gonna leave you more anxious, because at the end of the day, you're like, "I didn't ask any questions. What's gonna happen?" And I've gone through that. But always ask questions or prepare something. Like, do your research. And just make sure you, if and sometimes you can still be prepared and still have like that anxiety or still have that feeling of nervousness. That's perfectly fine. But like a lot of times I know, like nowadays with younger interviewers, or like ones that are more understanding, will not make you feel as anxious or nervous. Because I know sometimes, like, it's a job interview, this is like life or death essentially to some people, where they need a job, or they're not going to be able to pay their bills, kind of thing. But it's certainly important to feel comfortable in that interview and, like, have that confidence. And like I said, finesse the interview. Like, just like, if you have to mask it, but in a sense where I'm not saying mask it all 100%, but like to kind of get rid of that anxiety and that nervousness, to kind of switch yourself up a little bit, and like make sure like you are who you are, presenting like what you want to present, but also making sure like this person knows like I'm here to get this job. Like, that's what it is for. And one thing for me, like, when I interview folks, I'm very laid back in interviews, in the sense where, like, obviously you have to be very professional, but I want to make sure someone's not going to feel uncomfortable at all. Like, for example, I know Deborah has done this tattoo project for a very long time, her research. And one interview I did have before, where this person, she was so anxious and nervous, because she's like, a lot of folks where she lives was very conservative. Tattoos are not a thing. So every time she had an interview, like, the one thing she would get rejected for was because she had a visible tattoos. And I have tattoos and I'm proud of them. So very visible. But one thing I was like, well, you never have to worry about having tattoos in this job. Like, that's perfectly fine with me. Like, I don't have an issue. If I can have tattoos in my position, in where I'm the level I'm operating at, why can't you as my employer, essentially? So there are some folks out there who are going to be very laid back and very understanding, and some folks who maybe just not be, but regardless of the fact is that you need to just continue to prepare yourself, do that research, and just be ready for anything, because sometimes life just throws things at you. So sometimes you gotta be prepared to take it, or just find a way to navigate around that. So, yeah.
Thank you, Tara. Keisha, go ahead.
Yeah, no, just to build on what Tara was saying, a lot of organizations as well now will provide you with the interview questions ahead of time. So it kind of helps to take away that unknown. I think a lot of people know the anxiety can be really debilitating at times, right? Like where you're not even able to answer and you're not presenting yourself in your most fullest, best way because of the anxiety. And since it's like caring is sharing right now, I also have anxiety, and I do get this interviewing people as well, Tara. Like I get this feeling and I don't know what that's about, but yeah, it exists. But the other thing is, keep in mind, like when you're interviewing for positions, sometimes it isn't even about you and or what you might not have, right? It could be that the organization is seeking very specific skills. So I know I've interviewed many times and I'm like, there's no way I didn't get that. And I still don't get the position, even though like, why would I think to myself, why wouldn't they want to hire me based on how that interview went? But there could be so many other factors that we don't even know anything about. And now that I've had an opportunity to really be on the other side of things for the past few years, I really get to see sometimes you're really looking for not just that individual skill set, but their skill set are complementing other people on your team, right? Or you're interviewing and you have the exact same skills that everybody already has. So they want somebody who can bring something else. So it really sometimes has nothing to do with you personally, you as a person, as opposed to just the skills that you'd be bringing forward. So it's always best to just be super prepared. I gave the situation, task, action, results acronym in the chat because somebody gave that to me years ago, a friend of mine who works in the government. I've always used it. Every time I have an interview, I kind of set myself up and I think to myself, okay, I'm going to have situations, examples that align with the job. I'm going to figure out what task I took, what task was required of me, what actions I took, and what the results were. And if I continue to do that every time I'm faced with any question in the interview, even if I don't know what the question is going to be, I'm prepared, right? And when you're thinking about those personal, because I know I said using personal examples, you're obviously not getting too personal, right? On an interview, you want to keep it like high level. And asking the question, like Tara said, is key. At the end of an interview, when you ask, are there any questions? And they're like, no. It's like, oh, that's disappointing. You should really think of at least having one question, even if it's, what are you looking for? What type of skills do you want? What do people love most about the job? Like it can be really simple questions like that. And it gives them an opportunity to really talk. And then of course, the interview process is also you interviewing them and you deciding whether or not this is the place that you want to work. When you ask that question, you start seeing eyes darting across the room. Say if you're in a space where you can pick up on certain body language and things that are happening, it can kind of tell you whether or not this is a job or a place that you may or may not want to work. So something to keep in mind as well. Yeah.
Amazing. Sarmini, what do we have to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Tara said in terms of the anxiety, because I found myself in situations where, I was applying for a job, but I was really under pressure financially. And that definitely had a big impact on my anxiety because, it was a very real, like kind of threat, right? If I didn't get the job, then that can really impact your anxiety levels for sure. So, and it is a situation for so many people, right? So I think it's just taking that moment to really honor that part of your anxiety and not dismiss it, but really honor it and make space for it. But, finding those, strategies that help you deal with the anxiety in the moment, practicing your breathing. And I've also found that because of my anxiety, it helped to really make sure that I have ample time ahead to really, take my time, slow down, just like bodily wise as well, just slowing down, paying attention and preparing myself mentally and physically by being present inside my body. And that was kind of what helped me to, deal with my anxiety once the interview approached. So really knowing how long it takes you to be prepared and making time for that before the interview. And I think that was it. Sorry, I had something else to say, but I forgot. Yeah.
If it ever, actually, no, take your time. Do you any idea what it could be or no?
I just blanked out right now. So yeah, I think that's okay.
Can I jump in and fill in a blank real quick?
Yes.
When Sarmini talks, like you're a phenomenal clinician, Sarmini. I just wanted to say that, like the way you speak into, like we're talking about like the job, when you take it to a place about like emotion and mindfulness and connection and affirming, you're a phenomenal clinician. I just wanted to say that. So while you're drawing a blank, I wanted to you up in that way.
Thank you so much. Right back at you. I'm inspired by all of you. So
yeah, and
thank you so much.
Well, it's been a phenomenal. I know we're not ending just yet, but I just so inspired by both you and Tara. So I just wanted to say that. Continue.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
That's amazing. I wrote the same thing down where I said practicing your breathing and mental health is very important. Once again, something that's not really talked about a lot, but yeah, I agree with Keisha on that one. Ceremony, you've been amazing. You've been a grounding force. As we're over here trying to give advice, running all over the place, you center us back into our bodies and minds. So thank you for that. But we are reaching the end of our alumni panel. And even though we're in sociology, at least we know what's next now. And thank you so much, Keisha, Tara, Samini, for coming in and talking to us and answering our questions. We really appreciate it. For our students, please follow our Instagram. Sarah, do you mind just posting it down in the chat for everybody? I'd really appreciate that. Follow our Instagrams because we'll be having more events like this. Actually, it's the end of the semester, the end of the year, actually. So we'll be doing a lot of planning to have more events like this in the next semester because I feel like this did bring a lot of clarity to the students. Yeah, no, thank you so much, everybody. I'm just gonna hang back a bit just in case anybody else has any other questions to ask, but you can all sign off now and thank you so much for spending some time. Oh, our Insta, yeah, there we go. Our Instagram is in the chat now. Thank you everyone for joining.